Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by John DeDakis. He is a very interesting, we're reaching into the stratosphere today. He is an award-winning novelist, writing coach, and manuscript editor, and he is a former editor of CNN's The Situation Room with the Wolf Blitzer, who also wrote a review of the book. He's done mystery, suspense, thriller novels, and his most recent novel, Enemies Domestic. His protagonist, Lark Chadwick, is a pregnant White House secretary at a time in the not-too-distant future when abortion is the crime and the president is a dictator. Stop us when any of this starts to sound familiar. So he's originally from La Crosse, Wisconsin. He's in Baltimore, Maryland right now, and we're so grateful to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Cohen. It's good to be here.
No, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, it's Cameron.
Yes, no, it's okay. I knew what you meant, but so I wanted to kind of dive right into the, I guess, to the beginning. I normally say, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your book? But that's probably a lot to bite off. So let's back it up a little bit. And why don't you tell us a little bit about working at Legacy Media? We over here in independent media would know nothing about such things, but why don't we start in with how did you get into ending up on CNN writing scripts for Wolf Blitzer? Let's just
that does go back a ways, doesn't it? Well, look,
yeah. Don't worry, we have polyester soup and a brown cup of coffee. We'll be fine.
Well, let's see. I was going to go into law. My dad was a lawyer, and so he and I were going to go into practice together, and then I was going to use the law as a stepping stone to get into politics.
Oh.
But the Vietnam War came along, Nixon came along. I became a bit, cynical about where politics was going. And plus, I had a draft number in the Vietnam War of 14, which was basically, cannon fodder. I was going to be going. I enlisted to avoid the draft. And one of the things that happened is that I got orders to Vietnam, but they were changed at the last minute to Germany. And I spent the 2.5 years over in Frankfurt at the headquarters of the American Forces Radio and Television Network. And the first interview I did for this special events radio unit was with a guy named Alfred Hitchcock. And that was a life changer because I found out what I was good at and what I loved. And so when I got out of the Army, I went to the University of Wisconsin Journalism School in Madison, got a degree in broadcast journalism, and basically worked in broadcast journalism for the next 45 years. Covered the White House when Reagan was president, and then joined CNN in 1988 as a writer. But within a year, they made me an editor, which was tedious, and I needed a creative outlet. And that's when I started writing novels. But that took a long time. And so I ended my stint at CNN in 2013. The last 7 years at CNN were as one of Wolf Blitzer's editors. So it's a long road, but that was the plan all along. I mean, to get into legacy journalism, although they didn't call it that at the time.
No, it was just journalism back then. It took the rest of us to come along. I was briefly laughing when you talked about getting hired as a writer in 1988. That's when I was born. So that's gonna be fun. I have a client who he has a book out with Soup called About Not Losing. And it's about a medical malpractice case that starts in 1986 and ends in 1993. And he had written about it at the time as it was happening. And we put that together with his lawyer and their jury selection person into this really great book. And my job was to edit it down as something people would actually want to read from all the original material and everything. And he had a launch party, and I wasn't able to fly out. So we did kind of a virtual thing. And I made the joke. I said, yes, it took Jay going through the trial for 6 years. And then he had to spend 20 years to write it, wait for me to be born, get educated, go to college, go to grad school, start a writing career, start a media brand, go to get my MFA at Goddard College so that I could then do this project. So it only took 30-ish years for this book to come together.
Otherwise, it never would have happened, right?
That he's very kind and would say yes. That's exactly. He would say yes. That would have never, because we did a lot to his book and he didn't know it could be what we turned it into together. And so I was joking. Yeah, he just needed to wait 30 years for me to grow up to do this book, and now it's out and it's on sale today on Amazon. So, But no, I was laughing about that. But I want to dive right into time at the White House correspondent during the Reagan years.
Right.
Take us through a day of covering the Reagan administration. I mean,
well, this actually might open up a can of worms, because I was the White House correspondent for the Christian Broadcasting Network. My stuff appeared on the 700 Club, which was hosted by Pat Robertson.
I know it well.
And at the time, Pat was running for president in 1988. So I was trying to play it straight as a reporter, and I was under a lot of pressure, not so much from my news director, but from, a lot of the bigwigs at CBN, to get on board the Robertson for president bandwagon, which is not why I was there. So it was definitely interesting. So there's that as a backdrop. But covering the White House back in this would have been from 85 to 88. So the last 3 years of Reagan's presidency. So this is before cell phones, before the internet, and it was before digital media. It was videotape and film then. So it was a very good experience. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is that I really learned up close that it is by definition an adversarial relationship. It was Larry Speake's job as White House press secretary to make Reagan and his policies look perfect. It was our job as reporters to find out what's really going on. And that's true no matter who's president, no matter what party is in office. And unlike what some presidents will tell you, it is a firing offense at a reputable news organization to make things up. And so that was an important takeaway from that experience.
No, that's an excellent summary. I just it's hard to it's hard to imagine that press corps and the people that you sat in that room would let the present administration get away with 9/10 of the things that they do. And I get very disappointed because I'm kind of like, oh my God, if this were like 1987, they would be roasting you alive. Like, it's like you would just never start, because those journalists, they had teeth, they had prowess, they investigated stuff. The business model supported that, and it was totally different back then. But still, I haven't seen a White House press secretary, and I'm talking both administrations now, in the last 10, 15 years that would survive 5 minutes of what you guys did back in the day. Like, they just leave crying, I think.
Well, but I want to push back a little bit on that. And I've had a few discussions with my wife about this as well, because she's probably more in your camp. But I mean, think of it. Back in the day, truth and integrity mattered. And, we may differ, with a president on policy and things like that, but we are living in an era where, and I'll sound partisan, but I don't intend to be, Donald Trump, when he opens his mouth, lies are coming out, exaggerations, hyperbole, whatever you want to call it. And they're coming out like a gushing fire hose. And the audacity of some of the statements, it's hard to fact check in real time. It's almost as if you got to go back and go, wait a minute, how many wars has he solved? And so you're not necessarily getting pushback in the moment, but there are still news organizations like the New York Times, the Washington Post, that do go into depth and do push back and do call out the lies. But it takes a while because the lies are proliferating, and it's not easy to push back in the moment.
No, I feel that strongly myself. Every Monday at 7, I do a news hour. And I talk a lot about how it affects, people, but also business and markets, because I've been trying to get into doing business consulting. There's good money in that. So I've been trying to get into business consulting and whatnot, because I realize a lot of really intelligent business people don't do what I do, what we do, and that's read news, pay attention to narratives, investigate all this. And there's actually kind of a bit of a demand for someone who has a grasp of what's going on. And I'm kind of like, I see a business opportunity here anyway. Every Monday I do this news hour, and some weeks it is exhausting.
Yeah.
To just go through. I have 6 stories on my browser tab for the New York Times of being like this, but not this, or there's the context for this, or to understand why this is, you have to understand 5 other things over here. And it gets exhausting. And I laugh because I have trouble navigating it, and I have a master's degree from Norwich University in Vermont in political science. I have an MFA. Like, I'm not dumb, and I'm having trouble keeping up with it enough to explain to people the average person has no hope.
Well,
None.
And so I think what's happening is people are tuning out. There's just so much noise. They don't know what to believe, or they've got their minds made up and they, just will go about their business because, life goes on. And I think we are really, unless you're a real politico, you're just obsessed with politics, most people don't care. They don't care. And the thing I worry about is voter apathy in the midterms.
I worry about that as well. And I think it's going to hit both sides in odd and funny ways that will make for a lot of upsets, people winning where they shouldn't or where they wouldn't have ordinary, because I think there's exhaustion on both sides. And I think none of that was more evident than the MAGA split over the Epstein files, which has kind of died down.
Well, it sure has, hasn't it?
It has. I think, as I said on Monday, we're recording this on the 27th of August. This will not be heard long down the road from this, but we're recording this on the 27th of August. And on Monday's show, I was talking about several other things. And at the end of the show, I kind of said, and what are we not talking about today on this show? We're not talking about the Epstein files. That's what we're not talking about today. The distraction, I think, for better or for worse, has worked.
Sure, because he's now dispatched troops to DC, and Chicago is next, and then LA. And so, you just move the target and show some other shiny thing that will get everybody riled up.
Yes, or, start new cases against people, all this sort of thing. It's, this is how they go. And this, I think people forgot how chaotic the first term was. And I always remind people, it's like, they've been in office for 7 months. They've done 55% of Project 2025. And it feels like they've been in office for years. They started in January. It's almost September. People who will be hearing, it'll be September when people hear this. This is, and it's going to be September. It's crazy, so, and it's so much, it's so exhausting. And I think that's why people are going to be checked out in 26. People are not going to want to bother.
Right. And I'll give Trump credit for this, and that is that he has been a change agent. And that's morally neutral, but he has been very effective in being able to put into place a lot of his agenda, much more audacious and bold than many who have preceded him. I'm not saying what he's doing is a good thing, but he's effective. He's an effective communicator too. So.
To me, I think the presidency, I always draw comparisons to in terms of a lot of change quickly. 2 come to mind, one recent, one not so recent. One is Reagan with the massive amount of deregulation they did very early on.
Right.
and very quickly. And I think really shifted Washington, shifted society in ways that we're still living in today.
Sure.
And then, of course, FDR before that probably was the last time we had this type of societal upheaval kind of
Yeah.
occur. And so maybe every 40 years or so, we got to toss it all out. There's
Well,
a pattern here.
there was a lot of there was a lot of upheaval though when Nixon was president because of the war and all of the vitriol over that. I mean, it was
Yeah.
college campuses were blowing up. I mean, they were literally blowing up, and it seemed at the time as if the country was tearing itself apart. You had, MLK's assassination, Bobby Kennedy's assassination, all of this within just a couple of months of each other.
The complete
LBJ.
disaster was the 1968 Democratic National Convention.
That's exactly it. So those were that was upheaval, but not
Yeah,
necessarily in a proactive, public policy way. It was just a very unpopular war,
right.
and it split the country.
Yes, no, that and also, especially people kind of forget, especially as you get into the mid to late 70s, we're now post Watergate, you're post Kennedy assassinations, both of them, post MLK, post Watergate. It makes the late 70s very, very interesting. So
Oh,
I did a podcast with my mom one time called 40 Years of Elections with My Mom, where we talked through every president she voted for, beginning in 1976 to 2020 was when that show aired.
now did she
Um,
vote? Did she vote for Carter or?
Carter, yes, in 76, no in 80. She voted for Reagan in 80.
Okay, interesting. That
So
must have been a great conversation.
it was the thing about that episode I loved the most is because especially when we recorded the whole QAnon thing was really happening. And people were still kind of struggling with Trump voters. And I said, if you want to hear what a relatively wealthy white suburban non-QAnon Trump voter sounds like, who's going to vote for this man again, go listen to that show. Because she will, in very plain, not conspiratorial, plain language, explain why she continues to vote for this guy. And I need to go and clip it at some point and make it its own video. And I just kept sending people this episode because I'm like, my mom's not, they're not on my parents are not to social media. They're not into all of that. They're just reading their email newsletters like it's 1995, which they have been doing since 1995. Like they're just reading their email newsletters and the Denver Post app, and she's still voting for this guy. So if you want to hear that demo, which is a lot of people, go listen to my mom. She'll tell you why, sort of thing. But yeah, it's a very fascinating episode. If you're listening now, you should go listen to that 40 Years Election with My Mom. It's on YouTube. But yeah, it is there was a lot of appeal. I think a lot of exhaust. I think I kind of feel like it's that we have that late 70s exhaustion. We've got the stagflation. All we're missing is the polyester and the bigger cars. Well, it's like that sort of stagflation, exhaustion, malaise, to borrow a term from Jimmy Carter. It has that 1977 energy, and I kind of wonder how that's going to manifest as the years go by.
No clue.
I know.
I'm an optimist for no apparent reason.
That's one we will live into the answer on for sure. Absolutely. We're already 20 minutes in. We haven't even talked about your book yet. We've just talked about background and gone, let's refocus, Cameron. Bring it back to the guest. Let's talk about your book. What is it even called? I read it out and I forgot. Here it is. Enemies Domestic. Tell me about your book. Tell me about your writing process, how you chose the subject, and let's get into that because it should be good.
Okay, thanks very much. Enemies Domestic is book 6 in the Lark Chadwick mystery suspense thriller series. I started it 20 years ago. Lark has been, the series started when she was a college dropout trying to figure out what to do with her life after having been sexually assaulted. She ends up going into journalism because she solved the mystery of the accident that orphaned her as an infant. She's mentored by Lionel Stone, who is a former New York Times White House correspondent and a national editor and Pulitzer Prize winner. So that's her friend and mentor over the years. By the time we get to Enemies Domestic, Lark has been a cops and courts reporter in Georgia, and she's been a White House correspondent for the Associated Press. And in this particular story, we pick it up when Lark is pregnant The dad is dead. She is ambivalent about becoming a single mom. It's her first day on the job as White House press secretary. The first question in the daily briefing that she gets on live television comes from a Tucker Carlson type who asks, "Are you or are you not planning to abort your unborn child?" And as it turns out, this thrusts Lark into the middle of a highly toxic and polarized political fishbowl, and a dictator becomes president. So it could never happen, but that's where we are. And so it's a political thriller ripped from from reality. And I wrote it pretty much with my wife. Right after we started working on it, right after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and we began to wonder, what is America going to look like in a post-Roe era? And as it turns out, when Fake, the book before this, ended, Lark was pregnant, wondering what to do next. So the timing worked that I could put Lark in this hellscape.
Absolutely. So where did you come up with the idea to do this series?
It basically started when I just wanted to get published. I had no idea I was going to be writing a series. I didn't even know what my genre was. And the more you get rejected, the more you have to go back to the drawing board to try to figure out what's not working. And so I took the manuscript to a book club that met in our neighborhood in Atlanta. 25 women let me sit in on their critique of me writing as a woman. And I learned in the process of listening to them take it apart that I had three subplots that I didn't need. And so once I revised the book again, I took those subplots out, and the novel went from a 150,000 word mishmash to a 75,000 word mystery suspense novel. And by this time, I already had ideas for subsequent books. And so it just became a series, and it's inertia that continues to pull it along.
No, that's it's absolutely delightful. Let's talk writing process a little bit because I always love to hear about people's process. I am a hardcore outline. I am an absolute, I have to have here's my autism at work. I need a plan. I need chapters. I need characters. I need all things figured out before I even write Once Upon a Time. Like,
Yeah.
not that's how I start books, but, so yeah, like I'm a big outliner. And so I was wondering, are you an outliner or does you just write on the page and it just comes out of you like a fountain?
Well, you're in good company. I mean, Jeffrey Deaver is the same way. His outlines are probably 50 pages long,
Yeah.
and that's the way he writes, and he does pretty well for himself. I like to plan and have an idea of where I'm going, but I'm not as good an outliner as I think I am because when I'm writing, I realize that I get stuck not knowing how to connect the dots. And so by default, I'm much more of a seat of the pants writer as well. I'm actually I guess you could say, a planter. I plan it, but I run it by the seat of my pants as well. And if I can get the characters talking to each other, then I've discovered that writing is like dipping a straw into your subconscious. You ask questions, what if questions, and that is like taking a sip out of your subconscious. It comes through your fingers and onto the page, and it's spooky.
Yes, I am I like to have a good outline and a good plan. I feel like I have a lot of freedom within that for a lot of other things to happen that then dutifully get added to the outline.
Yeah.
But I like to have a little bit of a plan to kind of have a structure. I was working on something I've worked on for many years now, and I had finally had a breakthrough on this one part that's really just getting something big picture set up. And I realized the thing I was missing is I did not have a dinner conversation together that I needed. I've been waiting all this time for two people to just have a conversation. How is this going to go down? And how is this person going to introduce the subject, sort of thing. And I realized part of the problem was, well, I never really outlined this chapter. I just had three ideas. It isn't a wonder. So then I was kind of like, okay, here's the goals of this conversation. Here's what has to go down. And then all of a sudden breakthrough.
There you
So
go. Yeah.
it's yeah, so I'm very that's why I'm kind of wedded outlines, because
Yeah.
my brain gets lost if it's like, we have no plan, we don't know what we're doing, we're shutting down. Like,
Oh, absolutely. And and you're not alone. I mean, it can be you can feel very much like you're spinning your wheels if
yeah,
you're writing seat of the pants.
no, absolutely. Are we having a book 7 here soon?
I wouldn't say soon, but I would say that possibly, inevitably.
Yes.
Cindy and I are working on it. I've had to put it aside because I've had other things going on. But I think I've written about 6 or 7 chapters. Not sure, I'm liking it yet, but I've got an idea of where it's going to go, what I want to deal with. But it's it's a work in progress, emphasis on work as opposed to progress.
Yes. Well, I mean, as someone who has a book coming out in 3 weeks, I completely
Congratulations.
understand. And sometimes I get mad at myself because I'm kind of like, oh my goodness, I haven't been writing very much lately. And I've been busy with, work, and we're growing our podcast network right now at Suit Media. And I'm building shows with people and all this sort of thing. And I'm just like, but I'm not just doing very much creative writing. And then I'm kind of like, well, Cameron, let's review. Your client's book came out in March. You've been doing an anthology as well with 35 people that's coming out in October. You finally got your book together and it's coming out in September. And also you published 4 books in 6 years. I think it's okay to take a break now.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Good call.
yeah, it's been a little bit nuts and crazy. Um, But I did kind of want to circle back to the legacy versus traditional media sort of thing, because you also are a podcaster. You're obviously fluent in online. Your website looks great, all this type of thing. What's it like to go from the big bright lights of television in Atlanta down to us in the podcast world? Like,
Well, I don't think of it in quite those up and down terms. I left CNN, let's see, 2013, and basically it was when my third novel was coming out. I was already doing a lot of speaking and teaching and manuscript editing, so I basically glided into a second career, and it has continued to grow. When COVID came along, I realized, oh, I know how to interview people, and there's such a thing as Zoom. I don't think
mhm.
I was aware of Zoom until COVID, and
Nobody was.
right, and so
Yes, we all were introduced so quickly.
yeah, and so I'm sitting in my basement, talking to my friends, and others get to share and listen over my shoulder. So it's been a gradual realization that it's a wide horizon, and you might as well, take advantage of all the different things that are out there. So I'm happier now and having more fun now than ever.
Yeah, no, I do love when we talk about writing coaching and whatnot. I do love doing that too. I've been working with a woman who does equine gestalt coaching for autistic people and others. And she's a friend of the Wade Franson, our co-founder at Suit Media, and she had never really thought she was going to write a book. And so over the last year and a bit, we've sort of been writing this together, and it's been fun to kind of watch it, blossom, and for me to ask questions and more hear about this, and oh, this would be a great story here, or why, all this sort of thing. And we're about ready to move her to through the rest of the publishing process, which is really exciting.
It is
Um,
daunting but exciting.
it is very daunting because and especially even for me from a time work perspective, because like the next draft, I really got to go through it this time. It'll go for proofing to the proofing department, but it's like I really got to like go through it, get rid of all artifacts, make sure everything's numbered correctly. We've really got to do the big one now, sort of thing.
Yep.
But and we've had a working title. We're working on maybe a different title right now. And I ended up writing an introduction because we kind of laughed that she's drowning in autism. All of her clients are autistic. The man who's doing her book is autistic. Like so I did an introduction talking about her and her program and her land. I've been to her farm where she works and all this sort of thing. And in a little town, Brooklyn, Wisconsin, very small town.
Yeah, I'm from La Crosse.
Yeah, and so writing that introduction, and so we're really getting there. And it's a lot of fun. I always say I tell people thank you for trusting me with your work. Like because it's such a sacred thing, someone's giving you such an intimate part of themselves sort of thing.
Yep.
So I wanted to, when it came to the writing coach, I wanted to ask you, um, because people hear about it from me all the time. So I want to hear them hear from someone else. What is your coaching process like? What are some of those sort of sage pieces of advice you keep giving out to writers?
Well, the process really kind of depends on what the client needs. I really want to be responsive to their questions so that I can help them sort out whatever problem they're addressing. I think one thing I come across a lot is people doubt themselves and they don't think they're good enough. And so my job is not to break their spirit, which is easy to do when someone is very um, sensitive because this is their work and it's very much them. And so it's a matter of finding ways to be an encourager. I would say that's fundamental to what I do is try to find ways to encourage. And that means I can point out deficiencies, but I can also make suggestions on how they can make it better. And if it comes to that, I can give them examples of how they can do that. I think it's all very psychological and it's very relational.
No, I always tell people at their first appointment with me, I said, I am your writing coach, your book coach. I'm also going to be your part-time therapist
Yeah,
for the
right.
next several months as we work together. No, I mean, even when I was working on About Not Losing with Dr. Oxbury, we got into marriages, relationships, families, all sorts of personal, not talking about in detail, all sorts of personal realms and whatnot. On both sides, we're talking, we're sharing story, all this sort of thing. And like it's like we're gonna know a lot about each other by the time this is all said and done. So I take that. I also take that responsibility very seriously as well because writing is very vulnerable. And if you're doing someone's memoir or something, you're getting into very vulnerable subjects.
Right.
And so I really am so guarded about that process for people.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
It's yeah. So we're getting close to we're at a half hour now, and I usually only go about 45 minutes from a long-standing tradition of the show where I tell people if you have a long commute, take me with you. If you have a short commute, listen to me half in the morning, half in the evening. So in the last sort of 15 minutes we have together, because this has been so unbelievably delightful. I want to kind of get into the future of media because things are in flux right now.
Oh man.
Legacy media doesn't necessarily know what's next for them, especially some business models are failing, all this sort of thing. Those of us on the left in new media are fighting for air with legacy media. The right wing now has its own much larger than us ecosystem, and we're getting our lunch eaten. What do we do? What's your view? How do we get out of this? Help.
Well, one thing you're doing is podcasting. I mean, I think that podcasts are personal and easy to find. Everything is nichifying. The music industry is nichified, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Publishing the same way.
Oh, yes.
It's very splintered, which means then that it's hard to become well known nationally. It becoming a household name. But I think if we approach it, as a relationship, relationships grow as they go forward, and so word of mouth, I think, it shouldn't be underestimated. The legacy media, I mean, that's going through a change. There are very few newspapers out there anymore.
Yeah.
Local newspapers have gone away,
Yeah.
and there's now citizen journalists. But the problem with that is that it's hard for citizen journalists to do, hard-hitting investigative reporting because there's no big organization to back you up if you get sued. And so that can be very intimidating when a public official comes after you, knowing that they're going to lose in court, but they have deep pockets and they know how to bleed you dry because you don't have the resources that they do. And so
Yeah.
that kind of constricts a lot of uh, the investigative reporting and holding public officials accountable. You have a lot of legacy journalists who've been laid off because of their newspapers folding or for whatever reason, and so they are starting their own podcasts and outlets, and they have chops, and in some cases they have, more legal guns behind them. And so it's in transition. You've got Chat GPT, artificial intelligence, which is morally neutral, but it's a matter of what you do with it. And so it can be a source for good and ill. Um, so it's working itself out. It's working itself out. The internet has a tremendous reach, and but the it's the Wild West, and it's like, how do you know what's true? And being able to discern, truth from fiction and lies, that's tricky. But the thing that gives me hope is that there are still news organizations that, in my opinion, are reputable because they have editorial oversight. NPR, Washington Post, New York Times, Associated Press, Reuters, and the list can go on. They're still there, and it's a rocky time for them. But my suggestion is turn off the TV, including CNN, and read. I had a woman at a festival I was at, a writers' conference. She shook her finger at me, said, "You're nothing but fake news." And I said, "Where do you get your news?" And she said, "Breitbart." And my jaw dropped. And she said, "Well, I have to have my opinion reinforced." Actually, no, you have to have your
No,
opinion
I
informed, you know?
yeah. I had a reader tell me that one time, especially when I was more towards writing than I was doing video and audio, and they complained that I had challenged one of their core opinions, and I wrote back and I said, "Thank you. That means I've done my job today. Good."
Exactly,
Like,
exactly.
yes, I've accomplished something. It's like, I'll be a smile on my face for the next week. Thank you.
I had this will be stunning to you and your listeners. I was teaching at the Chautauqua Institution for 2 weeks this summer in southwestern New York State.
So
And
jealous. I want to go there so bad.
oh man, it's like Disneyland for nerds. And this week,
Yes.
one of the weeks I was there, the whole theme of the week, the theme for the entire week was the rise of authoritarianism, global authoritarianism. And at one of the lectures I attended, there was an ex-CIA analyst, and I asked the question during the Q&A, and I don't know the answer to the question, so I asked, "Is Donald Trump a Russian asset, a useful idiot, both, or neither? And if you don't know for sure, what's your best guess?" I'm asking an intelligence analyst, right? Somebody who
Right.
just might know. And he gave a thoughtful answer, and what his answer is isn't really the point. I'm walking out of the venue, and a person sidles over to me and says, "If I were president of the United States, I would have you arrested and deported." And I said, "For asking a question?" He said, "Yeah, because you implied that blah, blah, blah." No, you've got every right to ask a question, especially one if you don't know the answer, you go to people who might.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing wrong with asking the question. But as far as this guy was concerned, I no longer deserve to be an American citizen.
And unfortunately, that experience is extremely common
Yep, yep,
now.
yep.
Um, and we need to become fast friends because I have been dying to go to Chautauqua, New York since I was in high school. There's a a small low rent version out in Colorado that my nana took me to in high school for various and sundry things. I've driven past Chautauqua in New York. But I've always wanted to go there and hang out, so we need to become friends. But it's like, how do I get in with these people? But yeah, no, I mean that's it's just. I would also go one step farther back and say you should be concerned, dear mystical person at Chautauqua, why are we living in a country where I have to ask this kind of question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go back one step farther. This should not be on any of our minds. We should not be worrying if the American president is secretly working for Putin. That's not something we should be wondering about. Yet here we are.
Well, and just to kind of put a button on it, I was at a writers' conference in Nashville just this last week,
Mm,
and I was talking with a couple of ex-CIA people, and one was ex-Secret Service, and I asked them the same question, and um, they didn't know the answer either, but they said Trump is too erratic to be an asset. He's too
yeah.
unpredictable, and so he would never be someone you could manage if you were running an agent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of, a lot of I've never felt that Trump necessarily himself was an asset. I was always concerned about all the many people around him that seemed to have some uncomfortable connections in that direction and have gone to jail for some of that. I've always kind of was mad at that the mainstream press never focused on they focused all on, oh, Trump the man. I'm like, that's not the story. It's the people around him. It's
Yeah,
the
but how
Paul
do you,
Manaforts and the Roger Stones. That's
but
who we talked about. Like,
that's right. But how do you know about these people? You know about these people because this was also covered.
right. No, I
So
mean,
there.
I'm not saying that they didn't cover it. I'm saying from a narrative perspective, I wish the focus had been on that and less on the, oh, is the president compromised? I'm like, that I don't think is the story. I think the story is all the people around him who very much seem to be from a narrative view. I always
Okay.
thought that should have been the narrative.
Well, but narratives, I mean, there are arguments every day in newsrooms about what's the news.
Right.
And, a lot of people think, we have this conference call with all the other networks and go, well, what's the narrative of the day? The narrative is sort of, it varies from place to place, and the news changes so much. You can only beat the drum on one issue for so long before you have to move on.
Right.
It's not news after a while. News is what's new, not what, we've already covered this. We have to move on.
Yep.
That's why it drives, political reporters nuts when they're covering a presidential campaign, because
Yeah.
the candidate is saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's
Yeah.
not news, so
Right.
that means they're looking for something different.
Notable.
And that drives the
Yeah.
candidate nuts because this is my message. Well, great. Good luck with that because you're not in control of the message. Only when it comes out of your mouth. That's when you're in control. And so you talk to your people or you talk to this event and that event, and that's when you get your message out. But don't depend on the mainstream media to do that because that's not their job to publicize you. Their job is to report on you and inform people about you.
No, certainly. And there's also, I mean, I think many I think, more and better ways to accomplish that type of messaging these days, especially. And you see this, especially now with what's happening on social media and a short video, or Mom Donnie in New York having a scavenger hunt, or all this type of things. Like, there's lots of great and clever ways to engage voters that's not just relying on the media. I think some of the frustration, and I understand this too, because I get a lot of incoming stuff from listeners or readers or whatever have you, is I'm always amazed at what from the news filters down to people.
Yeah.
Like, so because I'll be like, yeah, this is this big sort of thing, and then someone will come along with 1/70th of
Right.
this big thing and
Right.
be like, oh, I heard about this. And I'm kind of like, great. Now let me give you the other 69 pieces that you're missing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Again, Mondays at 7. But it's, I mean, that's, I've always find it interesting what filters out to people,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
filters down to people, what people find out about, sort of thing. And I think that's where a lot of candidates, especially in that scenario, are hoping the news media talks about something enough that it will eventually filter down to the median voter.
Well, and a lot of people, I think myself included from time to
Yeah.
time, just read the headlines, and the headlines don't
Yeah.
necessarily reflect any nuance about the story.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, you can only get so far with a headline, and it's only when you go deeper that you find, well, it's not quite as neat as that.
No, I find that with short video. So, a long interview like this will probably be listened to several thousand times.
Well,
The
there was
25-second version of you saying that
right.
will be watched 50,000 times on 5 different platforms.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the 2025 phenomena of the just read the headlines. So it's like, yeah, it's like basically it's like I have 25 seconds to grab your attention, tell you something, and you're gone. And I have to accomplish informing you in 25 seconds. It's crazy.
There was a joke back in the late 60s, early 70s on how, how the networks would cover, Moses coming down from Mount Sinai. And the lead would be, Moses God gave Moses 10 commandments today, the most important of which are.
Yes. Yes, it's like, yeah, we're just gonna re-rank them for the ones that we think you'll care about the
That's
most.
it. That's it exactly. It's exactly
yes. Like it's kind of like, yeah, it's like no one cares about honor your mother, no one cares about that. The do not covet, that's the lead. Like
that's because the reporter had a problem with covetousness.
Exactly. And that's where we get into the bias of the ancient media establishment.
Exactly.
Well, Mr. DeDakis, you've been absolutely delightful. I'm going to get you out of here. So this is the part of the show where we do plugs. So why don't you let us know where we can find you online, how to keep up with you, all this sort of thing.
Best place to do that is my website, which is johndedakis.com. I'll spell it JOHN, D as in dog E, D as in dog A, KIS as in Sam.com. johndedakis.com. Everything you need to know is there, including how to get in touch with me.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you, Cameron. This has been fun.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you.